Altruism reflects Atavic genes, not culture. Editorial published in Medical Hypotheses 2007, 69, 241-249. Evolutionary, neurobiological, gene-based solution of the ideological puzzle of human altruism and cooperation. Riccardo Baschetti. Summary. Despite hundreds of published articles about humankind's eusocial behaviors, most scholars still regard the origin of human altruism and cooperation as an enduring puzzle, because it seems incompatible with two central tenets of evolution, namely, the competition between individuals and the consequent selective advantages of selfish traits. This puzzle, however, rather than being due to insurmountable scientific difficulties, is to be attributed to two powerful ideologies, which are politically opposite, but nevertheless concurred to prevent scholars from solving it. One ideology rejects the concept of genetic determinism, whereas the other dislikes the concept of group selection. As a consequence, these widespread ideologies, which are common in the scientific community, too, kept scholars from realizing that the puzzle of human altruism and cooperation can only be solved by proposing a theoretical model that is based precisely on both genetic determinism and group selection. This model, which was never advanced in published papers, is presented here. This article also proposes to regard ancestral environments as determinants of human eusociality. By contrast, virtually all previous articles about it leave primitive habitats unmentioned. To support the hypothesis that human unselfish behaviors represent genetically conserved traits that evolved ancestrally, not products of cultural transmission, this paper also discusses 6 groups of arguments in the section Genes versus Culture. Finally, this article advances a purely genetic evolutionary explanation for the uniqueness of human eusociality, thereby challenging prevailing cultural explanations for the incomparably developed levels of cooperation in humankind, which are observed in no other social species. Introduction. It has lately been reiterated that one of the enduring puzzles in biology and the social sciences is the origin and persistence of intraspecific cooperation and altruism in humans and other species. 1. The term puzzle, which was also adopted with reference to human sociality. 2. Has especially been used by many scholars to define cooperation. 3-6. The puzzle of such unselfish behaviors as altruism and cooperation would consist in the fact that evolution is based on a fierce competition between individuals. 7. And, therefore, natural selection should reward only selfish behaviors. To solve that puzzle, many scholars proposed hundreds of theoretical models. 1. Although the process of coding some of them has been defined tedious and error-prone. 8. Many authors tried to assess whether the origin of human altruism and cooperation could be accounted for by different models focusing on supposedly explicative mechanisms, including individual selection. 9. Kin selection. 10. Mutual benefit. 11. Direct reciprocity. 12. Indirect reciprocity. 13. Generalized reciprocity. 14. Inclusive fitness. 15. Friendship. 16. Reputation. 17. Generational overlap. 18. Information and group structure. 19. Imitation. 20. Altruistic punishment. 21. And cultural transmission. 22, 23. All of these models and others, however, fail to offer a persuasive solution of what has also been defined an enduring conundrum in evolutionary biology. 24. Indeed, the puzzle of human altruism and cooperation continues to be enduring one. This puzzle can be solved by the new model presented here. It proposes that human eusocial behaviors are genetically determined and reflect group selection. These connotations may explain why no one advanced this model before, probably for ideological reasons. Two opposite ideologies. Two powerful ideologies, despite being politically opposite, have presumably concurred to dissuade most scholars from exploring the hypothesis that human altruism and cooperation are determined genetically and produced by group selection. Indeed, one ideology, which has been described as the left liberal Marxist dogma of environmental determinism 25 rejects any form of genetic determinism, and especially the neurogenetic one 26, which argues that there is a directly causal relationship between gene and behavior. 27. The other ideology dislikes the concept of group selection. As Celeste M. Condit, distinguished research professor, University of Georgia, argued most appropriately, I believe that there is good reason to believe that humans have been subject to group selection. However, the geneticists I have spoken with in the US seem mostly unwilling to accept the concept. I believe that this is a holdover of US ideologies, which have been strongly individualist and anti-collectivist. Condit C.M., Personal Communication, 2007. The first ideology, which has also been defined ideologically based dogma hindering research. 28, explains why in some quarters there is a knee-jerk rejection to anything that smacks of a biological explanation of human behavior. 29. The second ideology explains why the hypothesis of group selection fell victim to a seemingly devastating critique in 1960s evolutionary biology. 30, p. 185. As the sentence against Galileo exemplifies, however, the progress of science may well be hindered by dogmatic obstacles, but scientific truths, sooner or later, come eventually to light. Indeed, the ideological rejection of neurogenetic determinism is scientifically unjustifiable now, in view of the growing scientific evidence that genes do dictate human behavior. 31 to 36. Likewise, the ideological dismissal of group selection is no longer tenable, because this concept re-emerged as an important component of a multilevel theory of evolution. 37. This scientific truth has recently been confirmed by two authors, who wrote that group selection is an important organizing principle that permeates evolutionary processes from the emergence of the first cells to eusociality and the economics of nations. 38. Considering that both ideologies outlined above have clearly been weakened by recent scientific evidence, it is time to investigate the hypothesis that human eusociality reflects purely genetic conserved traits that evolved by group selection. Such an unexplored hypothesis deserves particular attention, especially because, in animals, eusociality cannot arise without the driving force of group selection. 39. Moreover, it is worth recalling that Darwin himself wrote as follows: social qualities, the paramount importance of which to the lower animals is disputed by no one, were no doubt acquired by the progenitors of man in a similar manner, namely, through natural selection, aided by inherited habit. A tribe including many members who were always ready to aid one another, and to sacrifice themselves for the common good, would be victorious over most other tribes, and this would be natural. Selection 40, p. 129,132. 99.5% versus 0.5%. The enduring puzzle of human altruism and cooperation, besides being largely attributable to ideological factors, is also a consequence of a scientific misconception, which compromises most of the existing models proposed to solve that conundrum. Indeed, they generally aim at explaining the origin of human unselfish behaviors between unrelated individuals living in great societies. However, considering that our species began to live in great communities only in the last 0.5% of its existence, 41, after the advent of agriculture, 42, it is more logical to assume that the unselfish behaviors of modern humans reflect genetically conserved traits that were selected during the first 99.5% of humankind's evolution, when our hunter-gatherer ancestors lived in small groups consisting of a few tens of members. 41. If we adopt this gene-based evolutionary model, the origin of human altruism and cooperation emerges to be an obviousness, not a puzzle. Should a damaged airplane transporting a small group of evolutionary scientists be forced to land in the most savage and remotest part of the Amazonian forest, which represents an environment very similar to the one inhabited by our prehistoric ancestors, those scholars will not need mathematical models to determine the best strategy for optimizing their chances of survival in such a savage and hostile environment. Indeed, they will intuitively realize that the cohesion of the group is vital, because isolated individuals are more likely to be killed by predators. The unwillingness of selfish individuals to protect altruistically companions attacked by predators reduces the chances of both collective and individual survival, because the death of any companion weakens the group and its defensive capabilities against predators, thereby eventually menacing the survival of the entire group, including its selfish members. Both the failure of selfish individuals to cooperate in hunting and their unwillingness to share foods with companions reduce the chances of survival of the whole group, including its selfish members, because a lone hunter is often unsuccessful and an unequal sharing of foods results in the malnutrition-related debilitation of some companions, which, in turn, weakens the entire group, by impairing its defensive potentialities against predators. Once returned to their civilized nations after a period passed in the inhospitable Amazonian forest, those survivors will probably cease regarding the origin of altruism and cooperation as a puzzle. Rather, those scholars will likely agree that the altruistic and cooperative behaviors that enabled them to survive in that harshly savage habitat constitute the best and obvious strategy for minimizing the risks of extinction of small groups living in hostile environments, in which, by contrast, small groups of individuals behaving selfishly are doomed to perish. Ancestral environments. The origin and persistence of human altruism and cooperation can hardly be understood properly without taking into account the harshness of the ancestral environments, in which the survival of our forebears was menaced constantly. Today, the central role of such remote habitats is neglected by virtually all scholars. Revealingly, in the book Evolutionary Origins of Morality, which contains tens of articles written by 46 authors, only Harms discusses the idea that hostile environments, and in particular, hostile boundaries of ancestral ranges, provide conditions under which cooperative behavior can evolve. 43, p. 312. In contrast, 44 authors leave ancestral environments completely unmentioned. Only on the penultimate page of that book, the last author, commenting on the idea of Harms, acknowledges that the role of hostile environments in promoting the evolution of human cooperation is a genuinely new and important focus that deserves further study. 44, p. 338. Ancestral environments, besides explaining the origin of human altruism, can also account for its variations, which have recently been observed in 15 diverse populations. 45. Indeed, these variations probably reflect the different degrees of ancestral environmental harshness. In other words, it is plausible that populations behaving less altruistically than others. 45 have genetically inherited their reduced levels of altruism from distant forefathers who lived in environments that were less harsh than others. For example, ancestral groups living in habitats in which predators were absent, fruits abounded, and game consisted of small animals, which can be captured by a single hunter, did not need to evolve high levels of altruism and cooperation, because even groups of moderately selfish individuals had fairly good chances of survival. On the contrary, groups living in environments where predators were numerous, edible vegetables were scarce, and game consisted of large animals, which were unlikely to be captured or killed by a lone hunter, had to evolve markedly altruistic and cooperative traits, because the selfish ones would have resulted in the extinction of the group. It should be emphasized, however, that the almost idyllic habitats depicted in the first example were probably quite rare, which explains why altruism and cooperation, although with some variations. 45, are extremely common in modern humans. Genes versus culture. Arguably because of the imagined political and social dangers of a belief in biological determinism. 46, there is a widely held belief in the dogma of cultural determinism. 46. This dogma is particularly widespread among sociologists and anthropologists, which explains why many of them regard human altruistic behaviors as cultural products. 4, 22, 23. This cultural explanation for such unselfish traits, however, is becoming increasingly unconvincing in view of the mounting evidence that they have neurobiological bases. Here, the thesis that human altruism and cooperation represent genetically conserved ancestral traits, not cultural phenomena, will be supported by several arguments divided in 6 groups under the following subheadings: Neurobiology of altruism, altruism in infants, altruism in primates, cooperation in eusocial insects, strong reciprocity, economic games. Neurobiology of altruism. Thanks to the spectacular progresses of neurobiology, scientists have recently been able to demonstrate the neurobiological basis of human altruism 47, charitable donation 48, social cooperation 49, social interaction 50, empathy 51, 52, moral sensitivity 53, 54, moral judgments 55, 56, and moral attitude 57. The scientific suggestion that the brain does dictate behaviors has lately been strengthened by the evidence that the disruption of the prefrontal cortex diminishes reciprocal fairness 58 and increases utilitarian moral judgments 59. It seems unquestionable that all of these neurobiological findings associated with human eusocial behaviors reflect genetically determined functioning of the brain. Indeed, considering that more than one-half of the human genes are expressed in the brain 60, it is hard to reject the notion that a substantial fraction of our genetic information is involved in the development and functioning of the brain, and that means in behavior 60. Altruism in infants. There is scientific evidence that unselfish behaviors are displayed by very young children 61 to 64, whose age is sometimes computed in month 63. Altruism has lately been found even in infants of prelinguistic age 64. At such a tender age, of course, their altruism is far more plausibly attributable to genetic predisposition than to cultural transmission. This genetic attribution is strongly supported by the observation that most children shared less as they grew older 63, which disproves the old cultural dogma that only a good upbringing instills altruism in children. The suggestion that altruism has to do with genes, not with culture, is further corroborated by the altruistic helping in young chimpanzees 64. Indeed, while no one could reasonably invoke culture to explain their altruistic behavior, many will probably agree that such an unselfish behavior shared with human infants 64 can only be explained by the gene co-expression networks in human and chimpanzee brains 65. Altruism in primates. The cultural dogma, which unfortunately is still prevailing, cannot help explain human behaviors that seem to make little sense from a strict evolutionary perspective, such as risking one's life to save a drowning stranger 66. This extremely altruistic behavior, however, can easily be explained and makes evolutionary sense if we regard it as a genetically conserved behavior that evolved to favor the survival of the small ancestral groups at high risk of extinction in their hostile environments. In these habitats, our ancestors actually lived as prey rather than predators 67. Also other primates, including chimpanzees, lived in small groups menaced by hostile environments and were attacked by predators 68. Therefore, considering that we share 99.4% of our genes with chimpanzees 69 and that many of these evolutionarily shared genes are expressed in the brain 65 and dictate behavior 60, the evolution of our genetic instinct to save a drowning stranger makes sense in the light of Duvall's observations regarding primates 70. Indeed, he pointed out that most primates respond to each other's pain and distress because the members of these species survive through cooperation in hunting and defense against predators and, therefore, the evolution of succoring behavior and bonds of affection is understandable, as every individual's life counts for the rest of the group 70, p. 80. Precisely because the life of every member of a small group is important for its survival in harsh environments, it is not surprising that chimpanzees, who cannot swim, have sometimes made heroic efforts to save companions from drowning 71, p. 71. The fact that such a risky behavior of chimpanzees is sometimes successful 71, p. 71 demonstrates that it does make sense from an evolutionary perspective taking group selection into account. Probably no one would deny that genes, not culture, account for chimpanzees' altruistic behavior aimed at saving their drowning companions. Indeed, as has rightly been pointed out, the proximate cause of complex behaviors in animals lies in genetically expressed mechanisms 8. Therefore, in view of the impressive genetic similarity between humans and chimpanzees 65, 69, there is no reason to assume that the same behavior in humans can only be explained by cultural factors. Indeed, this assumption would infringe the principle of parsimony 70, p. 64, which prompted Duvall to write that if closely related species act the same, the underlying process probably is the same too, because the alternative would be to assume the evolution of divergent processes for similar behavior, which is a highly uneconomic assumption 70, p. 64. As Duvall lucidly noted, if we normally do not propose different causes for the same behavior in, say, tigers and lions, there is no good reason to do so for humans and chimpanzees, which are genetically as close or closer 70, p. 64. This line of reasoning, of course, also applies to another important altruistic behavior, namely, food sharing, which characterizes both human foragers 72, 73 and chimpanzees 74, 75. The selective advantages of food sharing are demonstrated by the nutritional homogeneity found recently in an egalitarian society with a strong food sharing ethic 76. Indeed, this homogeneity prevents the malnutrition-related debilitation of some members of the community. Such an undesirable debilitation, as argued above, would have been selectively disadvantageous for the small ancestral groups at high risk of extinction. Notably, Duvall's reasoning also applies to other unselfish behaviors that both humans and chimpanzees display with non-kin individuals, namely, cooperation, caring, consolation, special treatment of the handicapped, protection of injured individuals, and tolerance 41. With reference to the word stranger quoted above 66, it is important to dispel the wrong idea that, in primitive times, the costs of mistakenly treating unrelated individuals as kin, or treating strangers as partners, were very high 77. Indeed, this idea erroneously fails to consider that strangers, living as they were in the same hostile ancestral environments in which altruists survived and egoists perished, were very unlikely to be dangerously selfish individuals. This view is strongly supported by recent evidence found in indigenous Amazonia, where potentially hostile relations between strangers are transformed into relations of amicability 78. These peaceful relations between different indigenous groups in the thinly populated Amazonian forest are mainly attributable to its low population density, which entails little or no competition for food resources 79. This explains why the period of Paleolithic warlessness, grounded in low population density 79, ended when the advent of agriculture 42 resulted in an unprecedented demographic explosion 41. Our pre-agricultural ancestors, therefore, were very likely to act cooperatively even between groups, because, just as still occurs in Amazonia 78, they faced and combated a common enemy, namely, the harshness of their savage and hostile environments. Cooperation in eusocial insects. That human cooperation constitutes a genetically conserved behavior, not a cultural product, is also compellingly suggested by the observation that, besides humans, the next best cooperators in the animal kingdom are the eusocial insects, bees, wasps, ants, etc. 80. Given that these insects, with brains containing only a millionth the number of neurons as do ours 81, have been able to evolve exemplar cooperative behaviors that are determined genetically 82, not culturally, it is curious that many scholars claim that human cooperation can only be explained by cultural advances made possible by our superlative mental faculties. Strong reciprocity. In 2000, Gintis proposed a really innovative Model 83. This new approach, unlike all the previous ones advanced by other scholars, explains rather convincingly the origin of human eusociality. In his article, Gintis discussed what he called strong reciprocity and pointed out that a strong reciprocator is predisposed to cooperate with others and punish non-cooperators, even when this behavior cannot be justified in terms of self-interest 83. He also underscored that such an unselfish behavior probably has a significant genetic component 83. Despite this genetic connotation, the model proposed by Gintis, thanks to its unquestionable plausibility, was appreciated even by scholars whose aversion for genetic explanations is almost palpable in their papers. For example, Fair and Henrich, two champions of cultural explanations for human altruism 84 and cooperation 4, had to recognize that the model advanced by Gintis is based on the plausible idea 77 that human groups, in their ancestral habitats, probably faced extinction threats, wars, famines, environmental catastrophes, and, therefore, in these cases, neither reciprocal altruism nor indirect reciprocity can sustain the necessary cooperation that helps the groups to survive those threats. 77. Besides admitting that kin selection, too, does not work in these cases, because in most human groups membership is not restricted to relatives but is also open to non-kin members. Fair and Henrich acknowledged that groups with disproportionately many strong reciprocators are better able to survive. 77. It is evident that the model proposed by Gintis 83 is rather similar to the model advanced in the present article. What differentiates substantially the two models is that the one of Gintis posits that the ancestral groups faced risks of extinction only during a bad period that occurs in 1 year out of 1083, whereas the model proposed here is based on the thesis that the small ancestral groups were constantly threatened with extinction by their harshly savage and hostile environments. This model is more plausible than the one envisaged by Gintis because the predation that led our ancestors to cooperate 67 was constant, not limited to bad periods. Moreover, also the need to cooperate in hunting was constant, as suggested by the fact that, in chimpanzees, a lone hunter captures a monkey about 30% of the time, whereas a hunting party of 10 or more individuals is successful in nearly every hunt. 85. Economic games. As Gintis emphasized in the book Evolutionary Origins of Morality, a considerable body of evidence suggests that many people, in many different societies, and under many different social conditions, including complete anonymity, behave like the strong reciprocator. 86, p. 217. Indeed, experiments conducted by economists show that people cooperate for the common good in situations where standard rational choice game theory implies they should not. 87, p. 286. What economists call rational choice would impose to act selfishly in economic games, because self-interested competition is at the foundation of our understanding of market institutions. 87, p. 285. To the probable amazement of some unscrupulous businessmen, however, experimental economic games clearly demonstrate a general tendency in humans both to be generous to distantly related individuals and to punish cheaters, sometimes at great personal cost. 88. The fact that humans act altruistically and cooperatively in all economic games constitutes the best evidence that human unselfish behaviors represent genetically conserved traits evolved ancestrally and that they have nothing to do with culture. Indeed, despite the claim that cultural evolution occurs at much faster rates than genetic evolution and that practices can spread through a population in a single generation. 80. The individualism-based dominant culture that permeates the USA since the distant birth of capitalism has been unable to inculcate a rational self-interested strategy in the minds of Americans, as shown by the seemingly irrational altruism observed in most American students during economic games. 45. Such a puzzling unselfish behavior, however, does seem irrational in today's immense societies unconcerned with the virtually non-existent risk of extinction, but emerges to be perfectly rational if altruism is regarded as a genetically conserved trait that evolved in small ancestral groups at high risk of extinction. As has correctly been remarked, contemporary behavior is therefore a consequence of modern inputs being processed by mechanisms and driven by instincts designed for ancestral conditions. 89. It must be emphasized that those who champion culture-based explanations for human cooperation generally invoke such cultural mechanisms as imitation 20, 23, conformist transmission 23, and prestige-biased transmission 23. All of them, however, did prove most effective for transmitting swiftly futile and ephemeral things, such as women's fashions launched by famous actresses, but are absolutely inadequate for modifying behaviors and suppressing instincts that genetic evolution imprinted indelibly in the brains of our remote forefathers to prevent their extinction. Human exploratory instinct. In one of his numerous papers advocating cultural explanations for human cooperation, Henrik argued that if a particular approach claims to explain large-scale and anonymous cooperation in humans, then this approach must also either predict similar cooperation in other species or explain why the model is restricted only to humans. 23. Driven by his preference for cultural explanations, Henrik asked these questions: if large-scale cooperation is a product of purely natural selection acting on genes to favor something such as indirect reciprocity, why is not large-scale cooperation more widespread in nature? Why do not other social species like baboons, sea lions, chimpanzees cooperate at human levels? 23. These questions can be answered satisfactorily by proposing a purely genetic evolutionary explanation that takes human migrations into account. Indeed, humankind, unlike any other social species, migrated from its original habitats to enormously different environments. As a paradigmatic example, chimpanzees originated in tropical equatorial forests and still continue to live there. Conversely, humankind originated in Africa 90, but our pre-agricultural ancestors migrated so extensively that they, for instance, reached even Siberia 91, where environmental pressures are very different from, and harsher than, the African ones. Although possibly a reduced availability of food in humankind's original habitat may well be invoked reasonably to account for those remote migrations, it can be advanced that they were mainly due to what is probably the most distinctive trait of our species, namely, our exploratory instinct. In other words, it is plausible that our forebears walked through endless plains and crossed high mountains chiefly for knowing what existed beyond them. This irrepressible human instinct for knowledge is the same that, according to the Greek and Latin classical literature, spurred Ulysses to sail intrepidly beyond the Pillars of Hercules into the unknown. Such a Promethean human instinct also prompted Galileo to point his telescope skywards, guided polar explorers, drives astronauts, and urges scientists to enter new avenues for research. Conclusion. Reason suggests that the continuous migrations of the small groups of our distant forefathers to increasingly inhospitable environments, which often presented new threats and unpredictable perils, unavoidably entailed the genetic selection of the peerlessly effective group beneficial behaviors that characterize strong reciprocity. They proved vital for those small ancestral groups at high risk of extinction and, just as occurs in the case of any other genetic characteristic, have been transmitted to subsequent generations, which explains why those unequaled altruistic and cooperative behaviors are still present in modern humans. References. 1. Lehman L., Keller L. The Evolution of Cooperation and Altruism, a General Framework and a Classification of Models. JEVOL Bile 2006, 19, 1365-76. 2. Boyd R. The Puzzle of Human Sociality. Science 2006, 314, 1555-6. 3. Coleman A.M. The Puzzle of Cooperation. Nature 2006, 440, 744-5. 4. Henrik J. Henrik and Culture, Evolution, and the Puzzle of Human Cooperation. Con SYST Res 2006, 7, 220-45. 5. Johnson DDP, Stopka P., Knights S. The Puzzle of Human Cooperation. Nature 2003, 421, 911-2. 6. Fair E., Gokter S. The Puzzle of Human Cooperation. Nature 2003, 421, 912. 7. Nowak Ma. 5 Rules for the Evolution of Cooperation. Science 2006, 314, 1560-3. 8. Jintis H. The Hitchhiker's Guide to Altruism, gene culture coevolution, and the internalization of norms. J. The Herbile 2003, 220, 407-18. 9. Sanchez A., Cuesta J.A. Altruism may arise from individual selection. J. The Herbile 2005, 235, 233-40. 10. Taylor P.D., Weil G., Gardner A. Direct fitness or inclusive fitness, how shall we model kin selection? JEVOL Bile 2007, 20, 301-9. 11. Castro L., Toro Ma. Mutual benefit can promote the evolution of preferential interactions and in this way can lead to the evolution of true altruism. The Papul Bile 2004, 65, 239-47. 12. Boyd R., Richardson P.J. The evolution of reciprocity in sizable groups. J. The Herbile 1988, 132, 337-56. 13. Nowak Ma, Sigmund K. Evolution of Indirect Reciprocity. Nature 2005, 437, 1291-8. 14. Pfeiffer T., Rutzi, Killingback T., Taberski M., Bonhoeffer S. Evolution of Cooperation by Generalized Reciprocity. PROC Bile Sci 2005, 272, 1115-20. 15. Taylor P.D. Altruism in Viscous Populations, an Inclusive Fitness Model. JEVOL Ecol 1992, 6, 352-6. 16. Hrushka D.J., Henrik J. Friendship, Cliquishness and the Emergence of Cooperation. J. The Herbile 2006, 239, 1-15. 17. Suzuki S., Akiyama E. Reputation and the Evolution of Cooperation in Sizable Groups. PROC Bile Sci 2005, 272, 1373-7. 18. Taylor P.D., Irwin A.J. Overlapping generations can promote altruistic behavior. Evolution int J. Org Evolution 2000, 54, 1135-41. 19. Suzuki Y., Tokunaga Y. Effects of Information and Group Structure on Evolution of Altruism, Analysis of Two-Score Model by Covariance and Contextual Analyses. J. The Herbile. 2005, 232, 191-201. 20. Levine D.K., Pazender for W. The Evolution of Cooperation Through Imitation. Games Econ Behov 2007, 58, 293-315. 21. Fowler J.H. Altruistic Punishment and the Origin of Cooperation. PROC Natal Academic Sci USA 2005, 102, 7047-9. 22. Feldman M.W., Cavalli Sforza LL, Peck Jr. Gene Culture Coevolution, Models for the Evolution of Altruism with Cultural Transmission. PROC Natal Academic Sci USA 1985, 82, 5814-8. 23. Henrik J. Cultural Group Selection, Coevolutionary Processes and Large-Scale Cooperation. J. Econ Behov Oregon 2004, 53, 3-35. 24. Howard C., Mishir F., Nowak Ma, Dobeli M. Synergy and Discounting of Cooperation in Social Dilemmas. J. The Herbile 2006, 239, 195-202. 25. Butler D. Geneticist quits in protest at genes and violence claim. Nature 1995, 378, 224. 26. Rose S. Neurogenetic Determinism and the New Eugenics. B.R. Met J. 1998, 317, 1707-8. 27. Rose S. The Rise of Neurogenetic Determinism. Nature 1995, 373, 380-2. 28 Holden C. Behavior Geneticists Shun Colleague. Science 1995, 270, 1125. 29 Wilson T.P. The Image of Sociobiology. Science 1996, 274, 703-4. 30 Sober E., Wilson D.S. Summary of, Unto Others, The Evolution and Psychology of Unselfish Behavior. In, Katz L.D., Editor. Evolutionary Origins of Morality, Cross-Disciplinary Perspectives. Thorverton, UK, Imprint Academic, 2000. p. 257-68. 31 Lugo X, Kranzler H.R., Zoe L., Wang S., Galernter J. Personality traits of agreeableness and extroversion are associated with ADH4 variation. Biopsychiatry 2007, 61, 599-608. 32 Davies W., Isles A.R., Burgoyne P.S., Wilkinson L.S. X-linked imprinting, effects on brain and behavior. Biosays 2006, 28, 35-44. 33 McGuffin P., Martin N. Behavior and Genes. B.R. Met J. 1999, 319, 37-40. 34 Drew A.P. Genes and Human Behavior, The Emerging Paradigm. Zygone 1997, 32, 41-50. 35 Plomin R. Genes and Behavior. And Med 1995, 27, 503-5. 36 Plomin R. The Role of Inheritance in Behavior. Science 1990, 248, 183-8. 37 Borellomi. The Rise, Fall, and Resurrection of Group Selection. Endeavor 2005, 29, 43-7. 38 Tralson A., Nowak Ma. Evolution of Cooperation by Multilevel Selection. PROC Natal Academic Sci USA 2006, 103, 10952-5. 39 Wilson E.O., Haldobler Biosociality, Origin and Consequences. PROC Natal Academic Sci USA 2005, 102, 13367-71. 40 Darwin C.R. The Descent of Man and Selection in Relation to Sex. John Murray, London, 1875. Illiberan Classics Replica Edition. Adamant Media Corporation, 2005. 41 Baschetti R. The Dawn of Science-Based Moral Reasoning. Med Hypotheses 2007, 68, 4-8. 42 Richardson P.J., Boyd R., Bettinger R.L. Was agriculture impossible during the Pleistocene but mandatory during the Holocene? A Climate Change Hypothesis. A.M. Antique 2001, 66, 387-411. 43 Harms W. The Evolution of Cooperation in Hostile Environments. In, Katz L.D., Editor. Evolutionary Origins of Morality, Cross-Disciplinary Perspectives. Thorverton, UK, Imprint Academic, 2000. p. 308-13. 44 SKYRMSB Adaptive Dynamic Models and the Social Contract, Response to Commentary Discussion. In, Katz L.D., Editor. Evolutionary Origins of Morality, Cross-Disciplinary Perspectives. Thorverton, UK, Imprint Academic, 2000. p. 335-9. 45 Henrik J., McElrath R., Bar A., ETAL Costly Punishment Across Human Societies. Science 2006, 312, 1767-70. 46 Badcock C. More danger in doctrine than in genetics. Nature 1997, 388, 13. 47 Tankersley D. Stowe C.J., Hudel S.A. Altruism is associated with an increased neural response to agency. Nat Neurosci 2007, 10, 150-1. 48 Mal J., Kruger F., Zahn R., ETAL Human Fronto-Mesolimbic Networks Guide Decisions about Charitable Donation. PROC Natl Academic Sci USA 2006, 103, 15623-8. 49 Rilling J., Gutman D., Zay T., Pignoni G., Burns G., Kiltz C. A Neural Basis for Social Cooperation. Neuron 2002, 35, 395-405. 50 Skilbach L., Wolschlager A.M., Kramer N.C., ETAL Being with Virtual Others, Neural Correlates of Social Interaction. Neuropsychology 2006, 44, 718-30. 51 Sites R.J., Nickel J., Azari N.P. Functional Modularity of the Medial Prefrontal Cortex, Involvement in Human Empathy. Neuropsychology 2006, 20, 743-51. 52 Singer T., Seymour B., O'Doherty J.P., Stephen K., Dolan R.J., Frith C.D. Empathic neural responses are modulated by the perceived fairness of others. Nature 2006, 439, 466-9. 53 Robertson D., Snary J., Ousley O., et al. The Neural Processing of Moral Sensitivity to Issues of Justice and Care. Neuropsychology 2007, 45, 755-66. 54 Mal J., de Oliveira Souza R., Esslinger P.J., et al. The Neural Correlates of Moral Sensitivity, a Functional Magnetic Resonance Imaging Investigation of Basic and Moral Emotions. J. Neurosci 2002, 22, 2730-6. 55 Borg J. S., Heinz C., Van Horn J., Grafton S., Sinat Armstrong W. Consequences, Action, and Intention as Factors in Moral Judgments, an fMRI Investigation. J. Kahn Neurosci 2006, 18, 803-17. 56 Mal J., de Oliveira Souza R., Bermady I.E., Grafman J. Functional Networks in Emotional Moral and Non-Moral Social Judgments. Neuroimage 2002, 16, 696-703. 57 Logo Q, Nikik M., Wheatley T., Rich L. R., Martin A., Blair R. J. The Neural Basis of Implicit Moral Attitude, an IAT study using event-related fMRI. Neuroimage 2006, 30, 1449-57. 58 Knock D., Pasquale Leone A., Meyer K., Traer V., Fair E. Diminishing Reciprocal Fairness by Disrupting the Right Prefrontal Cortex. Science 2006, 314, 829-32. 59 Koenigs M., Young L., Adolphs R., ETAL Damage to the prefrontal cortex increases utilitarian moral judgments. Nature 2007, 446, 908-11. 60 Hamer D. Born That Way. Nature Med 1999, 5, 259-60. 61 Benenson J.F., Pascoe J., Radmore N. Children's Altruistic Behavior in the Dictator Game. EVO El Humbihov 2007, 28, 168-75. 62 Nafo A., Plomin R. Processual Behavior from Early to Middle Childhood, Genetic and Environmental Influences on Stability and Change. Dev Psychol 2006, 42, 771-86. 63 ADF, Castle J., Davies L., Demetriou H., Stimson C. A processual action in very early childhood. J. Child Psychiatry 1999, 40, 905-16. 64 Warnican F., Tomasello M. Altruistic Helping in Human Infants and Young Chimpanzees. Science 2006, 311, 1301-3. 65 Oldham M.C., Horvath S., Gershwin D.H. Conservation and Evolution of Gene Co-expression Networks in Human and Chimpanzee Brains. PROC Natal Academic Sci USA 2006, 103, 17973-8. 66 Penny. How did cooperative behavior evolve? Science 2005, 309, 93. 67 Ferber D. Preyed upon, hominids began to cooperate. Science 2006, 311, 1095. 68 Zuber-Buehler K., Jenny D. Leopard Predation and Primate Evolution. J. Hum EVOL 2002, 43, 873-86. 69 Wildman D., Uden M., Luigi, Grossman Lee, Goodman M. Implications of Natural Selection in Shaping 99.4% Non-Synonymous DNA Identity Between Humans and Chimpanzees, Enlarging Genus Homo. PROC Natal Academic Sci USA 2003, 100, 7181-8. 70 Duvall F. Good-Natured, The Origins of Right and Wrong in Humans and Other Animals. Cambridge, Harvard University Press, 1996. 71 Flack J.C., Duvall F.B.M. Being Nice is Not a Building Block of Morality. Response to Commentary Discussion. In, Katz L.D., Editor. Evolutionary Origins of Morality, Cross-Disciplinary Perspectives. Thorverton, UK, Imprint Academic, 2000. p. 67-77. 72 Bird R.B., Berta D.W., Smith E.A., Kushnick G.C. Risk and Reciprocity in Miriam Food Sharing. EVOL Humbihov 2002, 23, 297-321. 73 Hawks K., O'Connell J.F., Blurton Jones N.G. Hadza Meat Sharing. EVOL Humbihov 2001, 22, 113-42. 74 Slocum K., Newton Fisher N.E. Fruit Sharing Between Wild Adult Chimpanzees, Pan Troglodytes Schweinfurthii a Socially Significant Event? AMJ Primatal 2005, 65, 385-91. 75 Matani J.C., What's DP? Demographic Influences on the Hunting Behavior of Chimpanzees. AMJ Physical Anthropole 1999, 109, 439-54. 76 Sherry D.S., Marlowe F.W. Anthropometric data indicate nutritional homogeneity in Hadza foragers of Tanzania. AMJ Humbile 2007, 19, 107-18. 77 Fair E., Henrik J. Is strong reciprocity a maladaptation? On the Evolutionary Foundations of Human Altruism. In, Hammerstein P., Editor. Genetic and Cultural Evolution of Cooperation. Cambridge, MIT Press, 2003 p. 55-82. 78 Santos Granero F. Of Fear and Friendship, Amazonian Sociality Beyond Kinship and Affinity. J.R. Anthropole INST 2007, 13, 1-18. 79 Kelly R.C. The Evolution of Lethal Intergroup Violence. PROC Natal Academic Sci USA 2005, 102, 15294-8. 80 Henrik N., Henrik J. The Origins of Cooperation, A Cultural and Evolutionary Exploration Among the Chaldeans of Metro Detroit. Oxford University Press in Press. 81 Wilson E.O. Genomics, How to Make a Social Insect. Nature 2006, 443, 919-20. 82 Robinson G.E., Grisinger C.M., Whitfield C.W. Sociogenomics, Social Life in Molecular Terms. Nat Rev. Genet 2005, 6, 257-70. 83 Gintis H. Strong Reciprocity and Human Sociality. J. The Herbile 2000, 206, 169-79. 84 Fair E., Fishbacker U. The Nature of Human Altruism. Nature 2003, 425, 785-91. 85 Stanford C.B. Chimpanzee Hunting Behavior and Human Evolution. AMSci 1995, 83, 256-61. 86 Gintis H. Group Selection and Human Processually. In, Katz L.D., Editor. Evolutionary Origins of Morality, Cross-Disciplinary Perspectives. Thorverton, UK, Imprint Academic, 2000. p. 215-9. 87 Bolton G.E. Motivation and the Games People Play. In, Katz L.D., Editor. Evolutionary Origins of Morality, Cross-Disciplinary Perspectives. Thorverton, UK, Imprint Academic, 2000. p. 285-91. 88 Mace are Fair Game. Nature 2000, 406, 248-9. 89 Charlton B.G. A New Science of Health, Salutology and the Evolutionary Perspective. Court J. Med 1996, 89, 233-6. 90 Quintana Mersai L., Semino, Bandelt H.J., ETAL Genetic of an Early Exit of Homo sapiens sapiens from Africa through Eastern Africa. Nat Genet 1999, 23, 437-41. 91 Lel J.T., Sukernik R.I., Starikovskia Y.B., et al. The Dual Origin and Siberian Affinities of Native American Y Chromosomes. AMJ Hum Genet 2002, 70, 192-206.